Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all our witnesses being here. The issue really today comes down, there are several issues, but at the end of the day, we're dealing with a constitutional issue, and they're in a constitutional problem. I think our founders wisely gave us a federal city for the purposes of the federal government. And when that is mixed up with and intertwined with state government, it's going to get messy, and our founders had the wisdom to give us a federal city in which to do federal business. If we have issues like problems with D.C. having a voice for voting, it required an amendment to change that, to provide that, the 23rd. Is that correct, Dr. Furlan? I didn't hear you.
There's no one on this side is opposed to voting. It's just that you've got to bring the vote about the right way, the constitutional way.
That's right. It's a constitutional issue.
Absolutely.
And when it became an issue of elections, making sure D.C. had a voice, it required a constitutional amendment to correct that, and we have it. It's the 23rd Amendment. And Congress in the Constitution has been granted the exclusive authority in all matters whatsoever in this federal city, in the District of Columbia. So let me just ask you, I've got you, Dr. Furlan, let's go on. Does Congress have any authority to change the Constitution apart from the amendment process?
None whatsoever. You
None.
cannot change the Constitution by a mere statute.
None whatsoever. And so is what brings this discussion today. Would the admission of the District of Columbia as a state require a constitutional amendment?
As I read the Constitution, it would, because it is sui generis. It is unique. It's provided for in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. The idea that you can bootstrap the argument over to Article 4, just simply strange credulity. It is a sleight of hand argument.
I read it exactly the same way you do. So does Congress have the authority to alter the status of the district through legislation?
No.
Just want that to be made very, very clear. So if somehow this body violates the Constitution, in my opinion, and yours and that of many others, and proceeds with statehood, do you think that statehood status for the district would affect the federal government's ability to operate and for our own security, for that matter?
How this body violates the Constitution on a daily basis. Let's start with that.
All righty.
Okay, and
Fair
in
enough.
fact, none more so than with the demise of the doctrine of enumerated powers. Congress legislates in vast areas that it has no authority in under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Now, your question about how it would affect relationships, with this tiny enclave constituting the District of Columbia, you would have the federal government, in this tiny sense, surrounded by a single state. That is precisely what James Madison feared, recalling what happened in Philadelphia under the old Articles of Confederation. And he spoke of dependency and interdependency. The federal government would be dependent upon the state for all manner of goods and services, and the District of Columbia, or excuse me, this new 51st state would be, first of all, our first and only city-state. It has none of the characteristics that Madison set forth that would describe a state. And so we will have it also dependent on the federal government in ways that it is not currently, because the federal government would then lose plenary authority over the district, which it enjoys now, because ultimately the control of the district is through the Senate when the Senate has, excuse me, the Congress, when the Congress has to step in.
Thank you. In the few seconds I have left, and I agree, we violate the Constitution. We have 17 enumerated powers. Everything else is to be left to the states.
18.
18, depending on how you count. The 23rd Amendment, how is it in jeopardy with this movement of statehood? And I will yield back with that.
Well, under the 23rd Amendment, you would, under this proposal, you'd still have some people with their rights under this amendment, under this proposal, to select electors. But their power to do so, being so few in number, would be vastly greater than those of any citizens in the rest of the country. And so that would pose a problem right there. But again, the core issue is that they're attempting to get around the 23rd Amendment by merely redefining the district. And that is certainly inconsistent with the spirit and probably the letter of the 23rd Amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hice.